Let's go flat. So, we are back. Alright. Cool.
What?
Yeah. Boom. That's it. I agree with this.
Hey, good afternoon. Are you Amy from Wales? I just read the message you sent me.
Wow, yeah, this site is actually crazy good. I saw your pin was super close, so I figured I'd message you. What?
Experience literally everything. What happens after that? What purpose would we serve? What's our reason for even existing? And after a while, would we even want to? Now, digital immortality isn't happening anytime soon, so go out and enjoy actual life while you can. And a simulation without risk will never be as exciting or as fun as the real thing anyway. We just have to accept that we're not meant to live forever, and that's okay. But it'd be nice to have the option. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name is AJ, that's Hecklefish. This has been the Live Files. If you had fun or learned anything, do me a favor and like, subscribe, comment, and share. The YouTube algorithm is like an evil, sentient digital consciousness bent on our destruction, but with your help, we can defeat it. Until next time, be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated.
Goldfish, hecklefish, hurt by the cats are dying. The Wine Files ain't nothing but Eastern propaganda.
That's it.
On Melwater's property in the Monastash Ridge west of Ellensburg, Washington, there's a hole in the ground that looks like a well.
It was in Mel's hole.
It's not a well. Like the owners of the property before him, Mel used the hole as a trash dump.
Yeah.
His neighbors used it too.
Shit, the cat
broken
production.
appliances, old tires, everything went into the hole. After a while, Mel started to wonder, why doesn't it fill up? And then he started to notice other strange things about
How
the
many
hole.
points have we got?
His
I
dogs
need more.
wouldn't go near it. It caused his radio to
I
pick up
need-
strange signals, and it didn't seem to have a bottom. Mel's curiosity became an obsession. Well, let's see if we can get to the bottom of Mel's hole.
That.
Mel's hole is a round pit, 9 feet 9 inches in diameter. There's a stone retaining wall
Three.
built around it that goes down about 15 feet. After that, the hole extends down.
3 bosses.
Alright.
Alright.
Mel Waters had his wife dump everything in the hole, but so did his
That.
neighbors.
Yep. Okay.
This has been going on for a long time, for years before Mel even moved in. Mel's neighbors said they couldn't remember a time when the hole wasn't there. So why can't you hear objects hitting the bottom? Why can't you hear your own echo? Mel set out to determine exactly how far down this hole goes. An avid fisherman, Mel had spools of fishing line on hand. So he attached a 1-pound weight to the line and sent it down the hole. It went 4,500 feet, the full length of the reel, and didn't hit bottom. He reeled the line up, attached a roll of lifesavers, and sent it all the way down again. Mel wanted to see if there was water at the bottom, and if there was, the lifesavers would come up dissolved. But they came up dry. And Mel had more spools of fishing line, each one 5,000 feet. He attached another spool, now down almost 10,000 feet, and still no bottom. Spool after spool of fishing line went down the hole. He could not reach the bottom. By the time Mel ran out of line, he was 80,000 feet down, over 15 miles.
I'm just
and
going to
still
cord
no
3
bottom.
quarters of
While
the way down
experimenting,
and just start
Mel noticed that
piling.
his dogs wouldn't come anywhere near the hole. Even when forced, the dogs would dig their feet in. There were no animals of any kind near the hole. No wildlife, no insects. Birds even flew around it. And since the hole was known to his neighbors, Mel asked around if anyone noticed their dogs feeling uneasy by the hole. And they all said yes. Then one of his neighbors said, speaking of dogs, not too long ago his dog died, so he threw its body into the hole. A few days later, that dog came back. After Mel's neighbor threw his dead dog into the hole,
Throw your dead dog in the hole. Throw his backyard life.
I really don't know. They certainly did. Anyway, a couple of days after disposing of his dog's body down the hole, he saw it running through a wooded area near the property. He knew it was his dog because it was wearing a blue collar. But for some reason, the dog didn't come when he
damn.
called. The dog acted like he didn't know his owner at all.
Maybe it's a version of his dog from another dimension.
Well, that's definitely a theory. As the weird stories piled up and the fishing line kept going down, Mel was at a loss. He was right. Mel needed help figuring out exactly what this hole was. And in 1997, there's only one place to discuss the strange and mysterious and be taken seriously. Coast to Coast AM.
Oh shit.
Coast to Coast
I remember
was on
now.
hundreds of stations around the world and had 10 million listeners. If anyone could help Mel, it was Art Bell and his audience. Mel sent Art a message on February 21st, 1997.
Yeah, we'll be back.
Art called him, and Mel's home became known to the world. Over the course of several shows, Mel Waters would reveal more and more details about the mysterious hole. The good news is Mel was getting really good advice from people all around the world, like use a laser to measure or use radar to check the distance. The bad news is now millions of people knew about this hole, and from clues given by Mel on the radio, you can get a pretty good idea of where it was. The day after the first broadcast, Mel was returning to his property, but the entrance was blocked.
The government
Yeah. The U.S. military was now aware of the hole, and they wanted it, all to themselves.
After the show on Friday night, I went out there and noticed there were some releases with 29 different languages, and you meet people and you try to explain to them all this complicated care. A lot of the people today don't have a personalized engagement strategy to help them understand what it is that they need to do, and this is where it jumps.
Mills said that the hole could affect things in the environment around it. Animals avoided it, but plants seemed to grow extremely well. Radios acted weird. If Mel brought a radio near the hole, the signal would get very staticky, and then start picking up broadcasts from somewhere else. One day his radio started picking up what he describes as old-time music. So he goes to change the channel and tunes into a baseball game. This is fine until he learns the game was played in 1967, 30 years ago. Art's first call with Mel goes on for about an hour and then they wrap up.
No, I think
Mel
he's
was
gonna
staying
live.
in Ellensburg for a couple of days and had made the call from there. When Mel Waters returned from town, the access road to his property was blocked by armed military personnel, and there was evidence that heavy machinery had been brought in. Mel was told there was a plane crash on the property, but there was no report of a crash, no fire, no smoke. Still, Mel was told he couldn't access the property until the crash was completely investigated. When Mel asked to speak to the person in charge, a man in civilian clothes told him that the land was not necessarily his anymore.
Hold up.
And it would be very
Let's get some
easy to
stuff.
put a drug lab on the property if he didn't leave. Mel threatened to go to the press. The man in charge, the man in black, told him, go ahead and talk. Nobody would believe it. But Art Bell and his audience would believe it. A few days later, Art called Mel for an update. Mel said that a neighbor saw a dark beam coming out of the hole and up through the clouds, darker than anything he'd ever seen. Now, Mel admitted he didn't see this himself, but Art Bell and several callers said that this part of Washington has a lot of UFO sightings, disappearances, and other paranormal activity. Callers had their own theories. Maybe the hole was sitting on a ley line and there was a portal to another dimension, or it was a portal through time. That's why everything thrown into it disappeared. Maybe somewhere in an alternate reality, there's a big pile of garbage, all the devices and dead animals just piling up. Who knows? One caller thought this could be a tunnel to the Palworld.
Ooh, like a subway for missing people.
Something like that. There were a lot of theories. Since Mel couldn't access his property anymore, he talked to other locals trying to get more information. An elderly neighbor said that many years ago, there was a series of stone columns around the hole.
What's Stonehenge?
Right, without the cross beams, which are called lintels.
Lentils?
Lintels.
What I say?
Someone from the audience reminded Mel that calling into the show is a big mistake because obviously no one's listening. So the show ends and Mel agrees to come back for an update. Today Mel is scheduled to reappear. He's a no-show. Picking up his phone.
Maybe my audience is not aware, but it's true. Les Kellenberg, after we did the last program, and researched this, and I'll be doggone, they didn't find the hole, but they did find near the area where you were talking about a lot of military blueprints and all kinds of information that would indicate the military, in fact, had been there or was there. So they would have probably seen a lot of yellow gear, red marks on the ground. Yep.
It would be 3 years before Mel resurfaces. He said he was offered $3 million a year to lease his property to somebody, but the deal was sign a non-disclosure agreement, leave the country immediately, and never come back. So Mel takes the deal. He lives in Australia for 2 years, but he's missing his family and decides to come to the States for a visit. It wasn't. Mel was warned not to do this, but he does it anyway. During this time, he gets in touch with Art Bell and agrees to come on the radio.
Yeah, I think you're gonna die, bro. Yeah.
Perfect.
Perfect.
He was on a bus to visit his nephew. And on the bus, there was some kind of
Wait,
altercation.
stop doing that.
The passengers are questioned and put on a different bus. Then Mel walks out. last thing he remembers is that he's in San Francisco and 12 days have passed. Mel woke up in an alley. His wallet and keys were missing. He realizes his arm hurts. He pulls up his sleeve and there are needle holes and tape marks from an IV. And as he becomes more lucid, he tastes blood in his mouth. His back teeth are missing. Mel never makes it back to the property. There was legal action taken against him for illegal construction. Power lines, septic tanks, paved roads. Of course, he didn't build these. The government had occupied the property for 2 years. Still, Mel lost everything. And a day or two after calling into our show, his bank account was empty. Now, to be fair, plenty of people are calling in saying that this is all a hoax. Dr. Bell is the master. Hoax or not, it's a great story, so let's not continue. The art does say that the TV crew was in the area looking for the hole. They didn't find it, but they did find evidence of live military activity. And the no-fly zone had been mysteriously expanded to the area. In fact, Terra Server, which was a mapping site before Google Earth, showed that the whole area was blacked out. And this was confirmed. The skeptical caller said that Mel could have
Sheesh.
and pretended his was there. But that is, Terra Server launched 6 months after Mel made the first phone call. He couldn't have known. Soon we learned that a Native American tribe had contacted Mel and asked him if he wanted to come to the
Oh,
back
damn.
research.
Research what?
Another wilderness hole.
They took you to it. They took me there. I did not go all the way up to the hole, but there was conversation between the Native Americans and the Basque and blah blah blah, and basically agreed that everything was as it should be. That I wasn't from CNN or the FBI or CIA or whatever. And so I went there and I got to see the hole. Now, once there.
The second hole wasn't located on the Indian reservation where they lived. It was actually on public land that was used by Basques. The Basques are an ethnic group that comes from a small region between France and Spain. The Basques settled a couple of areas in the United States, including Nevada, in the mid-1800s. They were using this land to herd sheep. They told Mel that the hole was there for as long as their people were, so at least 200 years. They considered the hole and the land around it sacred. This hole was just over 9 feet wide, just like Mel's. But where Mel's hole had a stone retaining wall of a few feet, the second hole had a metal collar, a metal lining down as far as the eye could see. And this hole was warm to the touch. You could feel heat all around it. And the metal would make any sound, vibrate at all. Mel accidentally dropped the tool on the collar, and the impact was completely silent. So Mel and the Bats began their experiments. The first test was they lowered a bucket of ice down into the hole about 1,000 feet, and they kept some ice at the surface as a control. When the surface ice was melted, they brought the bucket back up. That ice didn't melt at all. And even stranger, the ice was no longer cold to the touch, and it wasn't wet. The ice felt like large pieces of salt. So they tried to melt the ice over an open flame.
It didn't melt, did it?
No, it caught fire. Not only that, it continued to burn for months, so they continued sending different amounts of ice down the hole. About 2/3 of the time it melted normally, but 1/3 of the time it was transformed. At this point, one of the braver Basque volunteered to go down the hole himself.
What? Is he nuts?
Yeah, everyone agrees that's not a good idea. So, they decided to send down a sheep.
A sheep. Oh, what happened to a sheep?
Well, I just felt I was in the presence of something extraordinary, something beyond extraordinary, something like in that category of having a religious thing. This was just such a stunning thing to witness.
The sheep did not want to go in the hole. The closer it got, the more it tried to kick its way out of its crate. They lowered the crate down the hole to 1,000 feet. At that point, it stopped moving. They felt a muffling sensation. They left the sheep down there for 30 minutes and then brought it back up. There was no movement. The crate was unchanged, and the sheep looked fine, but it was dead. The Basque, being shepherds, knew how to butcher a sheep, so they brought it to a table for a quick autopsy. First thing that they noticed is that the sheep looked like it was cooked from the inside. And taking up almost almost the entire cavity of the sheep's body was what Mel described as a giant tumor. Then the tumor starts moving.
What in the... It's going up with the big story.
Oh!
Yes. This is intense.
Then they cut the tumor open.
No.
Inside the tumor is what Mel describes as a fetal seal.
Wait. Did you just say a fetal seal?
Yeah, like a baby seal. It was attached to the tumor by an umbilical cord. But this seal-like creature had the eyes of a human. They watched the creature for a while as it crawled to the end of the table. And Mel felt like it wanted to get back to the hole, so he picked it up and set it near the edge. Of course, the creature was slimy, and Mel said that the fluid had the smell of ozone. So the men studied the creature, and it seemed to study the men for about 2 hours. Then the seal creature gave them a final look and jumped in the hole. Now, before Mel went to Nevada, he was diagnosed with advanced esophageal cancer. He had only 6 months to live. But after this experience, Mel was cancer-free. He thinks he was cured by the
Magic seal.
Yep. Mel felt like he had a transcendent experience. He was completely changed after this. And just then, the radio show runs out of time.
Across from me over here is the actual roadway into Mel's Hole. Don't go up that road. Up there a ways is a fence. But you get across that fence, you're in a deep bunch of trouble. It might be that you simply disappear. Period.
A few months later, Mel returned to Coast. Something crazy happened with that bucket of ice. Remember one of the bats took the burning ice to his cabin to keep warm? He had it in a stove. It burned for months, and it was pulling all the moisture out of the air. The air in the cabin was always dry. The owner's skin was always dry. He was constantly thirsty. When boiling water, the steam would be pulled into the stove. One day, the stove crashed through the floor and into the ground under the cabin. But it was still warm, so he patched up the floor and used the hole for warmth. A couple of weeks later, he's returning home and his entire cabin has collapsed and turned to dust. He moves in with his brother for a while. A month later, he comes back to the cabin and sees that the stove is now 5 feet underground, and the hole made by the stove was perfectly smooth.
It was making a new big bottomless hole.
It was, and they couldn't get the stove back up. It took a giant crane to finally get the stove out of the hole. At this point, the Basque said they were sometimes visited by the entity that they discovered in the hole.
The magic seal?
Yes, the magic seal. They felt it was a benevolent presence and considered the whole experience to be very spiritual. There are now brightly colored birds circling the hole. Birds that seem to be immune to bullets.
That's how they respond to a spiritual experience. Shoot the birds.
I guess.
Freaking Basque.
The Basque even believe the magic seal is communicating with them over the radio using a system of beeps and clicks as language which they can understand. The creature warns the Basque that the ice is dangerous and can't fall into the wrong hands and would lead to the destruction of the planet. Art asks if there's a recording of this language. There is. The Basque recorded everything. For the next hour, a few more theories are considered, and Art finally gets Mel to agree to come back on the show. But this time, he would bring the recording, photos, video, and everything he can get his hands on. Mel agrees to go back to Nevada and gather all the evidence. He hangs up, and the show ends. Mel is never heard from again. He doesn't respond to Art's calls, and eventually the line is disconnected. So after 5 years, the story of Mel's home finally comes to an end. But it left so many questions. There are a lot of unbuilt elements, and Mel's home is right near the top. So how much of the story can we confirm? First, the location of the home. Terra server didn't black out in part of Washington, but on Google Earth it showed back up. But if the military really had taken over the property, they would have covered up the home. People have been searching for it for years. Now, of the many locations I found, there was one that was really compelling. This is the Google map. Someone actually went to the location to see what was there. These are the pictures. During one of his phone calls, Mel said there were 2 old buildings on the property, and one of them eventually collapsed under snow. This fits the description pretty well. And also on the property is this. Yep, a hole about 9 feet wide with a stone retaining wall. exactly how Mel described. Now, this caused quite a stir online, but the hole turned out to be in a well, definitely had a bottom. If you search the internet, you'll find a lot of people claiming they found Mel's hole. They haven't. It's never been found. At least, not yet. As for Mel, he's a complicated character. There's no record of a Mel or Melvin Waters living in the area, but some have claimed he was using a pseudonym to protect his identity. That makes sense. Now, something that really hurts the credibility of the story is the lack of pictures. In every call, Art asks for photographs, but sometimes Mel just doesn't think to take a picture. He forgets, which is ridiculous. Another time he says cameras don't work near the hole because of interference. Or he does have pictures and recordings, but they're not handy, so he'll send them when he can. But in Mel's defense, he never plugs anything. Even if this is a hoax, he could have made a fortune selling t-shirts, books, phony photographs, anything. People would buy that stuff just because it's cool. I would buy a Mel's Hole t-shirt.
I went to Mel's Hole, and all I got was this magic seal piece.
Yeah, that part of the story was pretty wild. And that's a common argument, that Mel's story got crazier and crazier, and eventually he just couldn't keep up with it, so he bailed on the hoax. But he was pretty consistent with the facts over 5 years. And Art Bell tried many, many times to trip him up, but he couldn't do it. Now, the hole itself just isn't geologically possible. A hole many miles deep would be unstable and collapse in on itself.
Unless it was a bottomless hole to another dimension.
Right, unless it's that. But I don't think we'll ever know. Mel's Hole has many believers, but I don't think Art Bell is one of them. But Art was an entertainer, and this is the type of story that his listeners loved. It's a legend that people still talk about 30 years later. But for me and this channel, this was a masterclass on how to present an urban legend. Let the story breathe, but still challenge the specifics. Explore the mystery, but keep it grounded. Be critical, but compassionate. I try to approach topics this way. But very few others do. A channel that tells mysterious stories without giving all the facts will get more clicks, and it will get more subscribers. But that's a shame, because it's dishonest, and you deserve better. We all do. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name is AJ, that's Hecklefish. This has been the Wild Files. If you had fun or learned anything, do me a favor and like, subscribe, comment, share. Today's story was a request from you. And if you'd like to suggest a video, go to thewildfiles.com/tips. Special thanks to our generous patrons who make this channel possible. If you'd like to support the Wild Files, consider becoming a member on Patreon or picking up a
Hecklefish for President t-shirt.
Right. There are links below. That's going to do it. But until next time, be safe, be kind, and know that you are appreciated.
Started watching Y-Files instead of sleeping. Now I question everything. Even thread count seems suspicious.
Hecklefish knows about Egyptian cotton.
Mike fired up the box, and the lasers came to life. The machine produced a small, circular area of distortion. It was a vortex about 8 inches across that looked like ripples above a fire. This was unexpected. Mike didn't know what the vortex was, or if it was dangerous, so he grabbed a sheet metal screw and tossed it through the field. It vanished. Mike just stared and blinked and waited. The screw was just gone. So Mike powered down his machine and turned to head back into the house. Then he heard something clattering. It was the screw. It rolled to a stop about 2 feet from the box. Mike thought he invented some kind of teleportation device. He didn't. Michael Magnet invented a time machine. Mike Markham from Stanbury, Missouri, was an amateur inventor who liked to tinker. He lacked formal science training, but he had a natural aptitude for electronics. The back porch of his house looked like a home appliance graveyard. Old TVs, radios, and CD players were all dismantled with their insides spilled everywhere. There were spools of copper wire and magnets of all sizes. His current project was a Jacob's ladder, a device that consists of 2 metal rods which start close together at the bottom and spread apart as they go up. This produces climbing arcs of electricity. But Mike had an idea for a modified version of a Jacob's ladder. The first thing he had to do was create a transformer.
Mine meets the eye.
No, an electronic transformer.
And transformers are electronic. Hello.
mind if I continue?
Fine, go ahead.
To get the arc of the electricity going in a Jacob's ladder, you need a high voltage power supply, typically in the tens of thousands of volts. Now, in the United States, the standard household voltage is 120 or 240 volts. That won't do. So Mike built his own transformer.
Well, what's in disguise? Sorry, it's out of my system. Now go ahead.
Basically, what you do is wrap two separate coils of wire around a common core. One coil is connected to the power source, so in this case, the fuse box on Mike's house. The other coil then has more or fewer turns in order to step up or step down the voltage. So Mike sat down and just started coiling wire. After about 400 turns, he lost count. But he used enough wire to step up his voltage from 120 volts to 20,000 volts. Now he's got his power supply. For the climbing rods or conductors, they actually used wire hangers.
No, wire hangers, never! Somebody out there gets it.
How it's supposed to work is the voltage is applied to the conductors, the electrical.
What? Oh.
It won't work. If humidity changes, it won't work. Air temperature, movement, even a little bit of smoke or dust in the air, and it won't work. So Mike had an idea. What if he used lasers to heat the air around the conductors? This would lower the air resistance, ionize it, and make the spark ignite on its own. At least, that was the plan. So he removed the laser emitters from a couple of CD players, connected his homemade transformer, and fired it up. No spark. It didn't work. As he was going to disconnect the machine, Mike saw something strange. Hovering above the device was a sphere of distorted air. It looked kind of like the wavy mirage you see over a highway on a hot day. But this wasn't some powerful ball of energy. It was hardly visible. If you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it. Unsure what this thing was or if it was dangerous, Mike tossed the sheet metal screw into the energy field. The screw disappeared. Mike just stood there for a second, confused. He didn't know if the screw got vaporized or what happened. Then the screw fell out of the field and landed on the ground a couple of feet away. Now, he repeated this experiment a few times with the screw, and every time the same result. He tossed the object in, it disappeared for a second or so, then reappeared out of the energy field. Now, Mike didn't know if his machine was teleporting objects or possibly sending them a few seconds into the future. After a few more tests, the machine overloaded. The lasers were dead and the components were fried. Now, even though all that was left of Mike's invention was a burnt-out box of parts, he knew he was onto something. So now he would rebuild the machine, but this time, instead of it being 18 inches tall, he'd build it 8 feet tall. And to do that, he'd need access to a lot more power. And Mike knew exactly how to get it. Mike Barkham was pretty sure he invented a time machine, but to really test it, he'd need to scale up his invention. His prototype was only about 18 inches tall. Now he wanted to go bigger. Scaling up the parts of the machine wasn't a problem. Bigger conductors and even bigger lasers were available. The problem was power. He needed lots of it. His house gave him 120 volts. He stepped that up to 20,000 volts for the prototype, but his homemade transformer blew out after just a few minutes. If Mike was really going to scale and test his machine, he needed transformers that could handle 50,000 volts or more without breaking a sweat. Basically, he needed the kind of transformer you see on power poles, but those are not easy to get, and they're not cheap. Mike didn't have $15,000 to $20,000 to put into this experiment. Besides, he'd need more than 1 or 2 transformers, he'd need a few. So Mike had an idea. A bad idea. He knew there were 6 industrial-grade transformers just sitting in a yard doing nothing but getting rusty. but that yard was a substation for the King City, Missouri Power Company. So Mike called a couple of friends with pickup trucks and in broad daylight drove to the substation, loaded up the transformers, and drove away. A few weeks later, he had his next version of the machine. The transformers were connected to the grid, new lasers were in place, and the wire hanger conductors were upgraded to 4-foot-long, half-inch metal rods. This thing was a beast. Now, the moment of truth. Mike powered up the machine. There was a loud crack, a spark, and then nothing. His whole house went dark. The new machine knocked out the power. Then Mike looked out the window. He knocked out the power in the whole town. It took some tinkering, but soon Mike was able to get the machine running without causing brownouts all over town. And the machine? It worked. It created an energy field or vortex a few feet wide, so Mike sent objects through the vortex. But this time, objects weren't reappearing a few seconds later. They weren't reappearing at all. The objects were just vanishing to who knows where. One afternoon, Mike had a few friends over and they were tossing small objects into the energy field. They wondered, could a big object go through?
Yeah, that's the way it's like to do.
A few of Mike's buddies got behind the living room couch and pushed. The couch fit into the energy vortex and was gone. Yeah, that was the good news.
What's the bad news?
Mike's cat was on the couch at the time.
Yeah, so what's the bad news?
So now everyone is just standing there in an empty living room staring at this whirling field of energy. Then they heard a pounding on the front door. Mike opened the door, and there were 8 deputies on the property. The officer at the door had a search warrant. Mike's neighbors had reported a lot of weird activity happening at the house. But it didn't take long for police to put together Mike's project and reports from the power company of a lot of missing equipment. So whatever experiment Mike Markham was planning would have to wait, because now he's going to jail. For stealing the transformers and stealing power, Mike Markham got 60 days in jail and 5 years probation. Now, while he was in jail, Mike thought of different ways he could make the machine more efficient. But there was no way for Mike to build any of this. He lost his house, he lost his job. He was a pariah in his town because of the brownouts. It seemed like Mike's time machine career had come to an end. But then something happened. His story made the news. The headline was, Kansas City man tries to build time machine on porch.
A Missouri worker set out to make a time machine on his back porch. The contraption he came up with was not completely off the mark, according to scientists. There are theoretical physicists working on those areas, and it's not total nonsense, according to the chairman at the physics department at the University of Missouri at Kansas City. Stanberry police say the voltage that Markham had diverted into the contraption caused power interruptions in and around the northwest Missouri town of about 1300. Markham was arrested January 29th on a felony charge of stealing the transformers from a power generating station in King City. He pleaded guilty and last month was placed on 5 years probation. Police said the transformers had a capacity of 12 to 76,000 volts each, enough to easily cause electrocution or an explosion. Markham, who told police that he has 2 years of college-level electrical engineering, said he was building a time machine, but didn't have enough power for it. That's according to the Stanberry Police Chief Tom Hampton.
And that headline caught the interest of someone who would change Mike's life forever.
Desert and the great American Southwest. I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world's time zones. All of them covered equally by this program, coast to coast. I'm Art Bell. It is my honor and privilege to be escorting you through the second half of the weekend. And what a program it is going to be tonight.
If you're building a time machine and you need help getting the word out, there's no better person in the world to help you do that than Art Bell.
I set out to find young Mr. Markham, and I found him. Michael, are you there? Yeah. Good.
Art Bell interviewed Mike Markham for about an hour and a half on the Coast to Coast radio show. Not only did Mike sound legitimate, but he clearly had considerable knowledge and expertise in electronics. And so did Art Bell.
It's 400 charging you,
Watts, amps, voltages, stepping up, stepping down. Art knew about all that stuff. If Mike was faking it, he wasn't going to fool Art Bell.
Well, this was, I was using square waves where I could actually, it's easy, controlling the duty cycle is easy to control the voltage that way. Right. Because you can't really find, it's hard to find variacs rated at megawatts. So,
Man, I'll tell you, using square waves up at the ham operators heard you for miles.
And he didn't try to fool anyone. Mike came across as humble. He wasn't looking for fame or attention. In fact, Art Bell is the one who tracked Mike down and convinced him to come on the air. Millions of people listened to that interview that night. And before long, people were calling in with offers. Some had transformers they would donate. Others had property he can use. And plenty of people were ready to financially support Mike in building a new, bigger machine.
How do you feel about the possibility, Michael, of somebody coming along and being your mentor even more than this, maybe contributing money to build a great big gigantic version?
oh, that'd be great. That'd be like a dream come true.
For the next few days, offers came in, and Mike, with his new team, created a plan. He corresponded with a few physicists and picked their brains about his technology and how it could be used for time travel. Several scientists helped Mike come up with an idea for a mechanism with rotating magnets that would make the machine easier to control. So Mike got a warehouse, all the equipment he needed, and access to more power than he could ever use. It took about a year, but he finally built a newer, larger, and highly upgraded version of his time machine. And you know what? The machine worked. It took almost 18 years, but Art Bell was finally able to catch up with Mike Markham. Honestly, Art thought Mike was dead.
And I called you madman because I was convinced you were going to absolutely fry yourself alive and turn into a french fry. There are other people who have been involved in time travel, Mike, that I've had on the show, and honest to God, Mike, they're gone. I don't know where they are, whether it's Cheater or Anderson, others that we've had on the show, they're gone. I mean, they're gone.
But Mike Madman Markham was very much alive, and a lot had happened since the last time he and Art spoke. Because of Mike's last appearance on Coast to Coast, he suddenly had a lot of benefactors. He had a little money, equipment, and lots of power. Mike set up in a warehouse in Overland Park, Kansas, and there he built several iterations of his time machine. The most successful version used rotating magnets. So instead of having a small energy vortex, Mike was able to create what he called a plasma tornado.
Maybe it'll be more efficient if I use, instead of using basically heat from a laser in a cold room, the differential, the temperature difference between those two to stir the plasma, maybe even more efficient if I use the magnetic field to stir it. That's what I ended up doing.
Use the magnetic field to do what?
Basically, it's, well, in simple terms, this thing looks like basically a plasma tornado.
So how much power do you need to create a plasma tornado? Well, remember Mike's first machine? That prototype ran at 20,000 volts. Well, his next version...
The one that ate the couch and the cat?
Yep.
And what a waste of a perfectly good couch.
Stop it. Anyway, the next version used about 70,000 volts. This new machine in the warehouse, which is about 15 feet tall, it was pulling 3 million volts. That is a crazy amount of pressure.
Pressure?
Well, in simple terms, volts measure the pressure of force driving the electric current. So think of electricity like a water hose. Amps are how much water is flowing through the hose, or how much power is running through a circuit. Most households get between 100 and 200 amps of power.
Well, unless you got a grow room, then you need a lot more power.
What did I say about this?
Tomatoes! He's growing tomatoes!
Anyway, amps are the amount of power. Voltage is the pressure of the power. So imagine taking that water hose and making the end of it smaller and smaller. That increases the pressure of the water coming out of the end. So even if you don't have a lot of amps, you can still create really high voltage. That's what a transformer does. So using juice from the power company, supplemented by a couple of generators, Mike had more than enough power to run his machine.
2 cylinders, 1 cylinder inside the other.
Right.
With a magnetic, with another, basically a circle of magnetic electromagnets around it. So basically you got a bunch of plasma, inside of it with a magnetic field rotating it.
You know, what you are describing, I'm sure you've heard stories of the Philadelphia experiment, right?
Yeah.
Well, they described a similar electronic setup with regard to the rotating magnetic fields.
Art correctly pointed out that this is how the Philadelphia experiment was done, with high voltage and rotating magnetic fields. In fact, when Mike was arrested, he told the police he was building a time machine. Now, of course, they thought he was nuts, but several scientists said that if building a time machine was possible, Mike's technology was on the right track.
Because Einstein's equations do allow for time travel. And they're blueprints. Blueprints for different kinds of time travel designs that are compatible with Einstein's theory. For example, gigantic spinning cylinders. You go around the cylinder and you come back before you left.
So now Mike started testing the machine by sending objects through the vortex. First with small objects like bits of wood, baseballs, and little things like that. And they went through just fine, but they just disappeared, just like the couch.
And the cat.
But they really didn't disappear. They just ended up in different locations.
So, what, it's teleporting stuff?
No. The objects would go in and vanish, and then about 2 minutes later, they reappeared. But the objects ended up between 50 and 150 yards east or west of the machine. And always east and west, never north or south. Mike thought this could have something to do with the Earth's rotation or magnetic field. And look, I know the story sounds crazy.
I don't mind it.
But these tests were witnessed by 15 people. Anyone who donated money or equipment, Mike let them be a part of the project. And those people showed up. I would have too. And it's a good thing there were so many people on hand. Hamsters are fast.
Wait, did you just say hamsters?
Yep. The tests were so successful that Mike started sending small animals through, specifically mice, hamsters, and guinea pigs.
No more cats?
No.
That's a shame.
Between the inanimate objects and animals, Mike had successfully tested the machine about 200 times. It seemed like varying the voltage and the speed of the magnets could adjust how far objects were traveling. Before long, Mike could make a pretty good prediction of where an object was going to end up and how long it would take before reappearing. So at this point, there was really only one final test to try.
Do you mean?
Yep. Mike stood in front of the vortex, took a deep breath, and jumped. There was a flash of light, and Mike disappeared. Now, remember, Art Bell had been following this project closely. He was even planning a trip to the warehouse. But when Art checked in looking for Mike, nobody had seen him. He was just gone.
The media did pay attention, and the media did, including me, nationally, went on the air and said, Madman is gone. We can't find him.
When Mike came to, he was not in the warehouse. He was lying in the middle of a field somewhere with the worst headache he'd ever had. And there was a big problem. He had no memory of how he got there. He didn't even know his own name. So he got up and just started walking. Now, it took some time, but his memory slowly returned. Eventually, he hit Fairfield, Ohio, a suburb of Cincinnati. And Fairfield is 800 miles due east of the warehouse in Overland Park, Kansas. But Mike had no driver's license or ID of any kind, no credit cards, no money. So he went to the nearest homeless shelter to grab a meal and get his bearings. When he got to the shelter, he saw a newspaper. He had jumped 2 years into the future. Mike took a few odd jobs and got together enough money to take a bus back to his warehouse in Overland Park. When he got there, the warehouse was empty. Everything was gone. The machine, all the videos that he took of each test, and all his notes,
Fundo is your Australian lender for small, short-term loans without...
Or it could have just been the landlord who thought Mike was gone, so he just stole the equipment or threw it away.
No way, that stuff is still out there somewhere.
It might be. Now, Mike was pretty sure he could recreate the machine. He felt he could remember 90 to 95% of the process, but it would take a lot of money. The equipment in the warehouse was worth a couple of $1 million. But Mike still had memory gaps. He couldn't remember whose donors were. His list of supporters was in the warehouse. And that brings us to Mike's third appearance on Coast to Coast. He caught Art Bell up on everything that happened. And although he wasn't looking for money, once again, people were ready to help.
This one guy suggests, I'm actually looking at the website now, go to tell him to set up a GoFundMe account.
Yeah, GoFundMe or, well, that's crowdfunding, right?
Art also recommended that Mike pursue a book deal. And Mike admitted that he's no author, but if he teamed up with a ghostwriter, he could certainly cover all the technical details. Another suggestion was work with the government.
No!
What would you cooperate with them, or?
The thing with DARPA, well, I don't have first-hand experience with them, but I'm willing to bet they try to militarize every. I mean, basically, the check isn't free and clear. There's always strings attached.
I hear that.
Smart man.
So Mike had options, and Art Bell encouraged him to keep working.
All right, everybody, that's it. Everybody in the world wanted an update on Madman Markham, and now you've got it. He's not going to stop. What's next for Madman? Only time will tell. Good night.
And Mike Markham would continue his research and continue to experiment. Mike wanted to travel again, but he needed to bring things with him, so when he woke up, he could quickly get up to speed in case his memory failed again. A big problem he kept running into was that nothing metal could go through the vortex. Well, metal could go in, but it was unpredictable. Sometimes metal would come right out, like those sheet metal screws, or sometimes the metal would explode in a shower of sparks. But after some trial and error, Mike discovered that if a metal tube was built a specific way, it would act as a Faraday cage, meaning that the tube could travel through the portal and reappear undamaged. Plus, anything inside the tube would be unaffected, including metal. So Mike continued to document his work and built a pretty large following online. One day, Mike posted that he was ready to go through again. And this time he would go through inside the tube, and he'd take his cell phone with him. That way he'd have everything he needs, his notes, photographs, even money. It was a great idea. And that was the last anyone had heard from him. As always, Art Bell kept tabs on Mike, and was disappointed to hear that he was gone again. To where or when, nobody knew. But during one radio show, Art took a disturbing call. The caller had found a newspaper article from 1930. The article described a man who had drowned. His body had washed up on the beach. The article said he was found in a strange metal drum, and the only object he had on him was a small rectangular device that nobody could explain. The man had no ID, so he was named John Doe. But some people had a feeling his real name was Mike. When Art Bell fans talk about their favorite episodes, there are a few on everyone's list. Jonathan Reed's Alien in the Freezer, The Man Who Flew Over Area 51, The Mojave Phone Booth.
Everyone loves Mel's Hole.
Mel's Hole is a classic. And Mike Madman Markham is on that list. Art Bell loved time travel stories, and nobody could weave a tale like Art could. The third interview Art Bell did with Mike was in 2015, and it's a masterclass in storytelling. Art already had all the information. Everything from the early days of Mike building a Jacob's ladder on his porch, Mike going to jail for stealing the Transformers, the test with the animals, the warehouse, and Mike's 2-year jump in time. But Art teases the story out slowly. Nothing is spoiled. He walks you through the story at the perfect pace, giving you just enough information to keep you hooked. And we were hooked. And look, Mike Markham doesn't bring much personality to the story. But Art knows enough about electronics and physics to keep us in the loop on all the technical stuff. And Art Bell never condescended to his guests. He never ridiculed them. He made them feel comfortable, because Art knew that's how to get the story. I think this is one of the reasons why the Y-Files has success with these topics where many other channels don't. I don't condescend or ridicule. I don't talk down to you. And no matter how bonkers a topic is, I don't ridicule it. I don't have to believe a story to enjoy it. And if you believe a story that I don't, great. So here's a piece of unsolicited advice to creators who cover these topics with a snarky attitude. You're making the story about you, and that's a mistake. So, Madman Mike Markham, one of the best time travel stories ever. But is it true? Well, there's a lot of information about Mike on the internet that isn't true. In his last
Oh
interview
my.
with Art, Mike even debunks some of those stories. Like, he never sent a cat through the portal, but he did send the couch through, but no cat. And Mike addressed that article from 1930 where the man washed up on the beach in a metal drum. I always thought it was a great twist, but that never happened. And there's a story going around that Mike was still alive, but homeless, and died last year. Also not true. Now, I don't want to dox the guy, but Mike is still around. And unsurprisingly, it looks like he spent most of his career in technology. But what about the machine? Well, Mike Markham clearly knew a lot about electrical engineering. When he built that prototype on his porch, he was only 21 years old. And scientists did say that his technology was on the right track. Now, they didn't believe he could actually create a time machine, but they said if a theoretical time machine could be built, it would be done with high voltage and magnetism. Nikola Tesla thought he could possibly see through time using electromagnetism. And Einstein proved time travel was possible with gravity. The higher the gravity, the faster time moves. And in extreme gravity, like near a black hole, time would move very, very fast. If Mike Markham figured out a way to create a vortex of extremely high gravity, in theory, that would work.
It's already been scientifically proven you can use gravity to dilate time. Well, basically, I'm using electromagnetism, which is 10 to the 30th times stronger.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't need basically a black hole to do this.
Art Bell's audience called in with lots of questions and criticism, but Mike was ready for all of it. For example, there's something with time travel stories that really bothers me. Let's say you had a time machine that could move you 10 minutes into the future. Okay, fine. You move through time. But what about space? The Earth is spinning 1,000 miles per hour. It's orbiting the sun at 66,000 miles per hour. Our solar system zips through the galaxy at over 500,000 miles per hour, and our galaxy moves through space at 1.3 million miles per hour. So where you're sitting right now, in 10 minutes, you'll move almost 90,000 miles in space. Time machine stories never account for this. The Earth is always in the same place. But Mike Markham does address this. He says his machine stays in sync with the gravitational center of the Earth. So he's not only moving through time, he's moving through space. I've linked to all 3 interviews below. You can hear Mike fielding questions very calmly. He comes across as humble and not trying to prove anything. Remember, he didn't pursue Art Bell to tell his story. Art pursued Mike every time. Really, the main reason to be skeptical of Mike Markham's time travel story is he's here. If I figured out how to time travel to the future, I'd do it, wouldn't you? But who knows? Mike is still young. Maybe he's working on a newer version of his time machine. I hope he is. Now, people will roll their eyes at this story and say Mike's crazy.
Backwards.
But the world needs more people like Mike Markham. Because when time travel is invented, and I think it will one day, it will be invented by a madman.
By a madman. It'll be interesting if anyone cracks it.
Just like the Y-Files episode.
You watch too?
Religiously. Hecklefish is my spirit animal.
No.
Navy engineer Ed Cameron and his brother Duncan waited nervously. They hoped this time would be better than the last. A lot of good men died that day, and they did not die well. This new technology could turn the tide of World War II. Sacrifices had to be made. Ed hoped those sacrifices wouldn't be in vain. Just when they thought the experiment was working, all hell broke loose. They ran from the engine room to the deck. Like before, a swirling green vortex of light surrounded the ship. They kept running and gave each other a knowing look as they reached the end of the deck and jumped. Just as they were about to hit the water, Albielek opened his eyes. It was the most vivid dream he ever had. It felt like a memory. That June morning in 1977 was the day Albielek became obsessed with the Philadelphia experiment. As World War II loomed, the United States found itself unprepared. America wasn't prepared then. its military was only the 10th largest in the world, half the size of England's. The U.S. military needed an edge. Building an army would take years, so that edge would have to come from technology. During World War I, Nikola Tesla worked with the United States Army on remote control technology and ways to detect submarines. Tesla said he created a particle beam weapon nicknamed Tesla's Death Ray, though there's no evidence that worked.
Is there?
Okay, there might be evidence it worked. A little too low.
Tesla's Death Ray link down below, yo.
The war began in 1939. Germany seemed invincible. By 1942, Nazi forces occupied almost all of Europe, North Africa, and huge parts of Russia. The U.S., now part of the Allies, appeared to be on the losing side. Desperate for an advantage, the U.S. military once again looked to science. Tesla had ideas for electromagnetic weapons, including one for invisibility. In 1919, Albert Einstein proved light could be bent by gravity. Out of desperation, the United States launched Project Rainbow. Building on the theories of Tesla and Einstein, scientists designed a device that can make ships invisible to radar and invisible to the naked eye. The goal was ambitious: create a powerful electromagnetic field to warp space-time around the ship. A prototype was installed on the USS Eldridge. In July 1943, they were ready for the first test. Dr. John von Neumann, a scientist working with the Navy, would lead the project. To operate the equipment, von Neumann chose two Navy engineers, brothers Edward and Duncan Cameron. They manned their stations in the engine room, and when the call came in, they switched on the machine. Within a few seconds, the ship resonated with a deep humming sound. Then a glowing green fog appeared. People watching from the dock and nearby ships couldn't believe it. The Eldridge was gone. That is, until it mysteriously turned up in Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away. But the strangest part? It was seen there 10 minutes before the equipment was turned on.
Wait. So it was invisible or a time travel?
Well, 20 minutes later, the Eldridge reappeared in Philadelphia. But something had gone terribly wrong. When the Eldridge reappeared in Philadelphia, sailors on other ships cheered. They thought the experiment was a success. It wasn't. For the men aboard, it was a nightmare. Men were found fused in parts of the ship, screaming in agony. Ed and Duncan Cameron survived the experiment, but other survivors weren't so lucky. Some had severe burns and radiation sickness. Some went insane. Some men simply vanished. Despite the disaster, the U.S. Navy saw potential. They brought in their top scientific consultant, Albert Einstein, for advice.
Yeah, I'm thinking of our friend. Yeah, he's a good one to have on speed dial.
It sure is.
So you're going with the laws of physics are the same for all non-accelerating observers, and that the speed of light in a vacuum is constant, regardless of the observer's motion. Is that your final answer?
On October 28, 1943, after repairs and upgrades, it was time for another Philadelphia experiment. Ed and Duncan Cameron took their posts. The call came in from the bridge. It was time to go. Ed turned on the machine, which spun to life with a familiar low humming sound. The Cameron brothers waited nervously. A few seconds later, there was an explosion. The machine was shaking itself loose, and fires were breaking out everywhere. Ed and Duncan raced topside and saw the same bright green vortex surrounding the ship. They jumped over the railing, expecting to land in the water in the Philadelphia shipyard. Instead, they fell through the bright green light and hit dry land. They were still covered in light, but now the light was coming from a helicopter and the headlights of a Jeep. Two military policemen yanked Ed and Duncan to their feet and drove them to a building nearby. They were escorted down a long hallway and placed into an elevator. An MP hit a button, the door closed, and they felt themselves going down, a long way down. When the elevator doors opened, they saw a familiar face. John Van Neumann, the physicist in charge of the experiment. But Van Neumann looked old, very old. Van Neumann said, "Welcome to 1983, boys." The Canner brothers looked at each other confused. Did he say 1983? That's not right. The year was 1943. Then Van Neumann said, "Come with me. A lot has happened in the last 40 years." Ed and Duncan thought they were jumping to safety when they jumped overboard. They had no idea they'd be jumping through time. Ed and Duncan Cameron found themselves in an underground facility beneath Montauk Air Force Station on Long Island.
They got some cool looking wings.
Unofficially, it was the headquarters of the Montauk Project, a continuation and escalation of the Philadelphia experiment.
Oh, it's a dragon top dude.
The Montauk Project could manipulate the fabric of time and space, but now the manipulation could be controlled. Psychics and alien technology.
Well, one. Oop, he's killing. Get out of that.
Was the Montauk chair. The chair used computers to generate electromagnetic
Shablagoo.
human brainwaves. Nikola Tesla's theories on resonance and energy played a role in the chair's design. The technology that connected the human mind to the machine was reverse engineered from UFOs. Many recovered UFOs had no physical controls. They were operated by the mind of the pilot. The Montauk chair amplified psychic abilities, allowing subjects to manifest objects, see distant locations, and travel through time.
I hope it had good lumbar support. Time travel is minor on your lower back. Minor.
Both Ed and Duncan used the chair effectively, but Duncan was naturally talented. His abilities made him the focal point of the tests. During one intense session, Duncan's eyes rolled back. His voice became unnaturally deep, and he said he could see other worlds and parallel dimensions. He said the multiverse is real. Edward wasn't as proficient, but he could still travel through time. On one occasion, Ed and Duncan traveled together to the year 2137, and they did not like what they found. By 1987, Duncan had mastered the Montauk chair. He could visit any time or place and bring Ed with him. The brothers sat in their chairs. Duncan focused on sending them 150 years into the future to 2137. There was a flash of light, and suddenly they were in a wasteland. In the distance, they saw cities and ruins. They walked past the occasional outpost, but most locals didn't want anything to do with them. But some were willing to talk.
Sometime in the late 2020s, a nuclear war broke out between the West, Russia, and China. Every big city on Earth was destroyed, and most small cities too. Governments were gone. People became tribal again. The war caused a climate catastrophe that put the coastlines underwater. Only about 100 million people survived.
Despite this disaster, people still expressed hope for the future.
Wonderful get two tapped.
Many of us left, but we're still moving technology forward. Not as fast as we'd like, but we're resilient. We still innovate.
Hey bro, green seeds.
Building weapons, of course, but we've also been able to cure most diseases. And we think we've discovered a way to heal the planet. It's just a matter of time.
Just a matter of time, she said. Duncan and Ed decided to test this theory. They went into the future 300 more years, to 2749. This place was very different. Ed and Duncan described it as a utopia. Society had built itself in harmony with technology and nature. Buildings floated using anti-gravity. Energy was clean and limitless, pulled from the vacuum. Pollution didn't exist. And governments didn't exist.
Oh, I like the sound of that. I'm trying to think.
Yes, artificial intelligence. People lived in peace and wanted for nothing. Money was no longer necessary. Technology provided food, education, entertainment, and anything else they needed. Education and personal development were prioritized. People spent their lives learning and exploring.
Always felt that.
This point, Duncan could finally be free of the infamous Montauk Project and the Montauk Chair. So, they decided to stay. Ed opened his eyes and checked his watch.
Go, little bro. He does not tolerate no shit.
And then Ed heard Duncan's voice in his mind.
Freeze!
We can travel to the galaxy.
Freeze! Whew. A bit of health off you.
The sky was an eerie shade of purple. The air was thin and pasted with hail. Jagged mountains and barren plains stretched to the horizon.
Freeze his ass!
Ed was also curious why Duncan brought them to such a harsh place. Duncan said this planet was home to the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. Duncan described the inhabitants as tall, slender beings.
Oh, no. This strong, so I want a shield.
They could manipulate matter at the molecular level. They were nearly immortal. Ed was about to ask the question, but then Duncan closed his eyes, and once again there was a flash of light. Then they were in a lush jungle, and judging by the sound, this planet was teeming with life. And Duncan said it was, then transmitted an image into Ed's mind, a huge city built into the jungle landscape. Ed asked who lived there. Duncan motioned to the jungle behind them and said, "They do." Ed turned and saw two reptilian creatures watching them from the jungle. Yeah. Ed got the same impression. He said the creatures didn't look friendly, and Duncan said, "We should get out of here." Then he fell to his knees like
Freeze his ass!
and asked if he was all right. Duncan said, "No, Ed, I'm not. We need to get back to Montauk. There's something to tell you."
Oh my god.
Ed Cameron opened his eyes, disconnected from his chair, and bolted down the hall. He burst into his brother Duncan's room. Duncan looked terrible. He was panting, sweating, and his skin was pale. Dr. Von Neumann walked in next. "Ed, I'm sorry. Your brother is dying. Every time he jumps, it gets worse. Every jump spins off a new timeline. He's created paradoxes we didn't foresee. He's damaged the fabric of space-time itself." Ed asked if there was anything that could be done. "This all started in Philadelphia back in '43. We need to stop that experiment from ever happening. So, as soon as Duncan is strong enough, you two will make one last jump. We'll go to the Eldridge and destroy the equipment. That should repair our time." Ed agreed to go, but what happens after that? When you return from the Eldridge, Duncan will, to be honest with you, it's dangerous. Duncan will project his consciousness into the brains of infants in the late 1920s, before the experiment was conceived. Your host was named Hal Hughes. Ed was confused. He was born in 1916, when he coexisted with
Come on, Nightwing.
person. All your
Clutch up.
Hal Bielek won't know that
Oh.
there.
You're not clutching.
Your Duncan's knowledge hidden
Everything's gonna die.
will never be a part of the experiment. But if we need you, this version, in the future, you'll know where to find you. Now Ed understood what had to be done.
Good, at least somebody understands. And his story sounds like it was written by Christopher Nolan.
It turned out. Yeah, right.
The consciousness transfer was a security.
Not strong enough for that kid.
Duncan had a lot of valuable knowledge. If the Philadelphia experiment never happens, then the Montauk Project never happens. And maybe that's a good thing, but it makes sense to keep their knowledge safe, just in case. Ed felt a sudden shiver and asked Von Neumann a question. He was pretty sure he already knew the answer. He asked, what happens to them here in Montauk after the consciousness transfer? Once we're sure that both your consciousnesses have been transferred safely, I will tell Duncan afraid. The time is now. It's a subliminal message. The time is now. As soon as he hears the phrase, he will summon a monster from another dimension. That monster will destroy our equipment, our files, everything. And when that's done, it will kill us all. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Albiolek worked as an electrical engineer, and his co-workers described him as thoughtful and intelligent. But he also had a fascination with fringe science. In 1985, Al went to Montauk, New York, to hear Preston Nichols give a presentation about how he used electromagnetic waves for various applications, from healing to amplifying psychic power. Al wanted to learn more about his psychic research. Nichols walked on stage with his assistant, who he introduced to the audience. His name was Duncan Cameron. Though he'd never seen Duncan before, Al swore he knew him. After the presentation, Al introduced himself.
And we talked for about 2.5 hours. About halfway through this, I got this strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. I knew this guy from someplace. Well, when I asked him, he says, I do. I said, from where? He says, I have no idea. I said, I don't see anything. I also have no idea where it's from.
Preston smiled and said he wanted to abandon military base, the old Montauk Air Force Station. Preston said they might find answers there. They explored the empty buildings all day, and Al had an eerie sense that he'd been there before.
I felt something we didn't like. We went driving, finally parked the van.